Welcome to another episode of Asia Agenda. Our guest today is Napoleon Biggs. He's a leading digital entrepreneur and a marketing strategist with over 25 years experience building and scaling tech ventures across Asia. Napoleon's a serial founder who launched 6 startups, and he's the founder of Web Wednesday. That's a 7,000 member community for digital leaders across 6 Asian cities. Napoleon's work spans e-commerce, software as a service, digital media, and now the topic of today's show, primarily generative AI. Through his company, Instant Studio, Napoleon leads the development of private, on-brand Gen AI solutions for commerce, content, and product design. Napoleon's also a frequent speaker and moderator and commentator for Bloomberg, CNBC, BBC, Reuters, Campaign Asia, and Marketing Interactive. And now today on our show, we've known each other for it has to be a couple decades, and I'm really happy to welcome him onto Asia Agenda today. Hey, Napoleon.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I've always wanted to be interviewed by you because I'm usually interviewing you. So although you're the real journalist, right? I'm just a pretend community organizer that likes to interview people. So I'm ready. I'm on tenterhooks.
I could tell. I know that you're really good at interviewing yourself, and I know you're great at presenting. The first sort of contact we had with each other was through Web Wednesday, and
Yeah.
I've seen you evolve over the years. I think a lot of people who are listening and watching right now don't really know what Web Wednesday is or kind of what your trajectory and journey was. Could you give us a Reader's Digest version of where you're from, how you've gotten to where you are?
Reader's Digest version, sure. I'm half Irish, half English. I grew up in Spain. So from the day one, I was used to living overseas. I learned Chinese when people were saying, what are you going to do with Chinese? You're going to open a restaurant. And I studied in Leeds and in Beijing. That brought me into Hong Kong, where I jumped into actually the media world working for AP. And I've followed the evolution of as new platforms and technologies have come along, I've basically jumped into them, sometimes slightly ahead of the curve, which has taken a while to turn into a business. But, you know, so my career has basically evolved from satellite TV into the internet, into e-commerce, into social media and content generation. So I basically I've seen the opportunity to take storytelling content and transition it into different media.
Now, you're half Irish, half English, you said, grew up in Spain. Yes. How did you end up with a French name? I never asked you that in all the time I've known you.
You know, it's really funny because I asked my dad, and he goes, yeah, we just liked it. I asked my mum, who was Irish. She came up with this wonderful story. I won't give you the gory details because there's a Reader's Digest version and there's a real version, which is my grandfather was left to name me. He's Irish, Catholic Irish. He didn't like the Brits, the English. So he chose a name of somebody that the Brits weren't particularly, keen on, Napoleon. So I was given the name Napoleon and, I've had to deal with that in English society for about 20 years. Might explain why I moved overseas.
And don't mention Waterloo, right?
Yeah, it's funny. So, most people don't know that. Most people think of cakes or pizzas.
Yes. I of course, have to go the intellectual route, even though I like all the cakes. Here's the thing. You and I have stayed in touch, but it's been episodic in some ways over the last couple of decades. And every time I come back to you, you're doing something different and new, fairly cutting edge. You yourself referred to the fact that you kind of are ahead of the curve sometimes with your language studies, with your choice of things that you're doing. What's the through line in all of this? What are you all about if I kind of step back and look at what's consistent?
We can get very deep on this. I mean, on a psychological basis, I think I get bored easily and impatient. So you find a lot of businesses kind of get stuck in a mud, right? So that drives you to want to try something new. And then technology always feels like it needs a marketing story on the front of it, because technology is always either overselling itself, as the era we're in now, or underselling itself, where it's like does amazing things, but people just don't know how to use it. So I've my career looks like it's hopped around, but actually the through line, as you call it, I've never heard that term, is the idea of taking, you know, technology and finding ways to implement it in people's lives, right? I have a little mantra I use for myself. I won't share the whole thing, but it's basically going from analog to digital. I've always felt, that you can go, I experienced it myself living in China. It took 3 hours to make an international phone call when I was there. Now you can WeChat somebody. So the benefits of it, I've felt myself. So I've always felt it's not translated very well. So one of the reasons I set up Web Wednesday, I saw a massive disconnect between all the digital kind of tech entrepreneurs and the corporates. Massive disconnect. I thought the best way to do that is to bring people together, get them to discuss outside of a presentation environment. What is this technology? What does it do? Why should I care? How will it help me?
But everybody comes at the world from a specific angle. If I cut you open, are you bleeding marketing blood, or what are you at your core?
A communicator.
Communicator. Okay.
Yeah.
And you've added a level of complexity, which is you're not doing it. It would be sort of more normal for you in a lot of senses to be doing it in the Western world, probably UK or continental Europe. You picked Asia. You picked it before it was really fashionable. You picked it when it, cost so much money to make phone calls. Took 3 hours sometimes just to get them booked. I remember those days too. But you picked Asia. Why? And you picked going from the, communicating in the analog world to the digital world again before it was really fashionable. Why?
I picked Asia because I was studying in Oxford, and obviously then at school, and the next thing was to try Oxbridge. I was fluent in Spanish and French, and my career counselor said you should do Spanish and French. And I went, what? And I wanted to learn, when you're in the UK 20, 30 years ago, it's quite a small world, right? Europe. And the idea of learning Russian came along. Maybe I should have learned Russian. But I looked at it and I go, wait, another world, Chinese. So, China, the idea of learning Chinese was a challenge. It was such a foreign world, so different that I thought, when you're a young man, it's like, I want to discover something new, right? And I want to own it. So that's where Asia started off with China. Funnily enough, China is now kind of Asia, dominant in Asia. Yeah, so that's the kind of route to Asia, as it were, is through the language. It was the challenge of a new culture, a new way of looking at things, and when you're living in England 30 years ago, China was this kind of communist den of iniquity, right, which nobody knew anything about.
On the other side of it is the tech side of things. And specifically, every time, you remind me of friends I have in the West who, whenever I go see them, there's a new gadget that they need to show me. With you, it's never a gadget. It's always some kind of platform or technology or software. And, you've now come all the way around to cutting edge in the latest thing that's out there, which is AI. I'm wondering why AI, why Gen AI in particular?
I think it is wrong to see technology as kind of little islands independent of themselves. I mean, if you hear Jensen Huang, all these big, gurus talk, the only reason we're able to do AI is because of the evolution of the internet. If the internet wasn't there, we wouldn't be able, the machine learning wouldn't have any content, right? So to me, it's a very clear evolution. If you've been involved in the internet, as I have, the early days with AP was moving content from satellites to undersea cables, is, to me, it's a very clear evolution. You're going from the foundations to how people interact with each other and with content. So I think the problem is the nomenclature, right? We get stuck in names, Gen AI, or, who who talks about the web anymore, right? Who talks about TCP/IP? Who talks about all these horrible acronyms that engineers are so good at inventing, and the rest of the world goes, what the hell does that mean? So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but to me, it's been a very clear path. You go from content delivered on satellites to websites, to games, to apps, mobile apps, to social media, to helping agencies understand social media, to e-commerce, which is a kind of now a mix of product and social media, to content creation for those channels, right? The world we live in now is fast-paced. How humans by themselves cannot keep up with it, whether it's on the consumption or the delivery angle, right? So to me, it's about the ability to reduce the mundane, right? And just allow us to create stuff, move into areas where we're not doing boring PowerPoints or, cut and pasting or Photoshopping. We can put our brains, apply them to other more challenging and interesting things in life.
What is clear to me, you talked about getting baffled sometimes by engineering acronyms and the kind of inscrutability that technology sometimes is to the layman. You cut right through that. When you talk about it, you make it seem very straightforward. And I think to a lot of us, it's not. And I'm trying to understand here, going back to what I was asking about Gen AI. So that's where you've landed now. And you've been through iterations of different
But the question
technologies.
I'd ask back to you is, what is Gen AI? Again, it's an acronym. It's a kind of, succinct way of saying nothing.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you.
It's like content, right?
But okay, and it's like saying digital. What does digital really mean? I get your point. But what you're doing, I'm thinking of it more now that I'm starting to get up to my neck in AI. I'm using large language models, and I'm dealing with companies that create agents, AI agents. So I was thinking of Gen AI as a branch, and that's the branch that produces and creates. So I see the consistency and how you use it to reach people and communicate with them. I really want to dig a little bit into, you set up an agency that focuses on this kind of work, and human beings are working there. You're using this as a new tool, and you're communicating in different ways. Can you talk about why you kind of took a risk, jumped into this, and set up what you're doing? Talk about what you're doing now.
Sure. So let me kind of answer your kind of previous question, is that let's break it down, right? AI is like the internet, right? I call it like jelly, right? You can do, or Americans, jello, right? You can shape it into whatever shape you want it to be. So I think that what I've found is, in the early days, you want to embrace everything. And what's happening is, the technology evolves, you find your niche, right? One niche of people using AI have gone down the analytical route, where they use the machine learning and the speed of understanding to take data and tell you, this is a better way to manage your portfolio. This is a better way to analyze this sales data. This is a better way to analyze your customers and produce ads, right? So there's a mathematical side, and then there's the kind of the visible side, right? And then there's a sound side. There's a lot of elements here. So I think what happened, to answer your second question, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I saw AI taking off, and I thought, I don't know anything about this. What is it? How can I use it? And I went and I dabbled, like everybody. You create an image, and you share it, and it's like the early days of social. Oh look, here's my breakfast. And what happened was, I thought the best way to learn is to go and hang out with some engineers. So I've known this team based out of Guangzhou for over 20 years. It's an international team based out of China, ahead of the game again. There's Americans, Chinese, Eastern Europeans, all working out of China and kind of remotely in Germany and all this stuff, building software for governments to do auctions. So really robust enterprise software. Because of the friction with China and the US, 2 years ago, their client said, sorry, you've got developers in China, we can't work with you. The owner very cleverly said, I've got to retrain my engineers to learn Python, see what AI is about. So they started learning AI programming. open source, what they could do. Being in China, they could access the Chinese platforms at the time weren't so sophisticated, and the US platforms. I jumped in and said, right, let's work out what we can do together. They've showed me what can and can't be done with the software, a combination of, you know, machine learning and software, traditional software on top. And I go out and I find use cases, because the problem about AI is it can do everything and it can do nothing. You need to find use cases. When I say nothing, I mean without a purpose.
Right.
Right?
Right.
People need to find a purpose to use it. This is why you see all these reports, these rubbish reports that say, oh, 7% of companies use this and find it useful, because they haven't applied it with a purpose. It's like walking into an office and going, here's the internet, you use it, right? You've got to find layers on top, right? Why did social media take off? Why did ads take off? Because people found little niches that they understood and they applied a purpose to it. So what I've been doing is working with these guys, and we've been going out and talking to the kind of industry that I know, e-commerce, branding agencies, and said, what is your pain point? What can we do to solve it? Now let's work on an example and see if this technology can really solve it. In some cases, it can't. In other cases, it can.
I see. So your crew in China, in southern China, they're kind of the technological spine, and you're the one who figures out how to apply the learnings basically to have a business. You find the usage cases, is what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm the kind of go-to-market, if you want to use another acronym, I'm the GTM guy, but basically I'm going and I'm finding, through my network, Web Wednesdays, finding partners in e-commerce, finding partners in the ad agency world, finding partners in MarTech, and saying, what is your problem? How can we help you? Can we apply our technology? And we're starting to do it. We've been kind of under the radar for 2 years. From September last year, we've come into force.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to time this interview for early this year was I want to get at the meat of this, which is what are those cases? How are you using the technology? What are you doing with it? And how do we see it? Or are we already seeing it out there?
But, you know, it's really funny. It's evolved. I mean, I originally thought the e-commerce world would embrace it, but I'm actually finding that because there's a lot of issues. If you go to brands, you know, brands are a bit protective, you know, and they're born to be protective. So brands, any kind of branding stuff with AI always gets a bit edgy and very critiqued. But there's below that kind of premium level of a brand, there's what companies do to get their message out, right? And the problem that we're seeing is that a French company, a New York company, a Korean company, they will make content with models that look like them, models in Paris, models, you know, in the weather in Paris, models in New York snow, and they send it out to the world. They go, right, here's your ads, use it. You know, somebody sitting in an office in KL or Singapore or Bangkok goes, there's no snow here. What are you talking about? These people don't look like us. You know, they're not same body shapes. This doesn't make sense. But if we use it to buy ads, we're not going to get the results you want. So they're in this dilemma where they have no control over the output, but they are still pushed to make results. So they go and they haven't got the time, because most of these companies are big agencies or, you know, regional brand teams that are, you know, pushed to the edge. And I've spent a lot of time with these people, and they have no resources. They are so squeezed, more and more so nowadays. So if you can come along and say, here's a way to do it faster, I can take your ad made in New York, made in Paris, we can split it down into lots of different levels, and we can change the model, make it look like you know, somebody from Kuala Lumpur, make it look like somebody wearing a hijab, you know, make it relevant, the environment relevant, put, you know, it's Eid, it's Chinese New Year, make it relevant, and it happens in seconds, right? So we've basically built software that disassembles an ad and recompiles it and changes elements in it depending on the audience.
I got two questions for this. Now we're sort of getting at, you know, my little light bulb is coming on, but I want to see if I'm reading this right. On one level, we're talking about localization, and I guess as a communicator, you want to be able to help them have what goes out there, connect with people who are in that target market. But then you also have the technological side of it. I think it kind of goes deeper than just localization. Is what you're doing, is what you created, is that proprietary technology?
I'm pausing because I don't think any technology is 100% proprietary, right? Especially, technology is iterative, right?
Right.
The bit that we created that's proprietary is a bit that disassembles and assembles and does it.
So that's like
for,
an agent, right? Its
yeah, you
task is
could. I mean,
to
if
take it
you want to
apart,
use
put
it,
it back together.
yeah. If you want to use jargon, it's
Yeah.
agentic. But what it's doing is that's, but underlying that, we don't have billions of dollars, as you can see from my background.
Yeah.
What we're
That's not a
doing,
palace.
yeah, it's not a palace. There's no like beach down there. There should be.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
is that what we're doing? The world we live in is very interesting. Is that the money's gone into the foundation models. It's a bit like the foundation of the internet, right? We're not building the servers. What we're doing is building the software that sits on those servers. So the being in China is fantastic because the DeepSeek moment happened, and suddenly the whole world embraces Chinese AI, apart from the Americans, because they go, it's cheap, it's open source, and it does just as good as American stuff. So we have, basically what we do is I have a research team that look at all the latest developments, and they're moving fast, and we basically plug the latest, whether it's Nano Banana from Google, whether it's Mistral, whether it's ByteDance's own Seedream, whether it's DeepSeek. We basically take the best and we plug it into our platform, and we then direct the kind of agent, as it were, to that particular source, depending on the goal. As you can imagine, Chinese LLMs, particularly in the content space, are trained on Chinese people, right? ByteDance is Douyin. I know it has TikTok, or it used to have TikTok, but Douyin, the content is primarily Chinese people. So, and Google, maybe it's global, but basically OpenAI and all these guys, primarily Western. So when you try and make people faces or models, they'll lean towards their sources. So we plug in different engines. We know which one's good at what, and then we direct the agent to it depending on the client's needs.
Right. I'm not trying to split hairs here. It's just, this raises, again, a lot of questions. Every time you answer, I feel like more things come to mind. And what I'm trying to understand is, we talk about agencies having creatives. So, they come in, they come up with a concept. You have people who do the drawings, or, they create the video script, the storyline, and then they execute the video. Here, a lot of times it sounds like what you're talking about is you're receiving an ad from headquarters. The messaging is there. It's consistent with the brand. They want that to be global. But it's not, in the old days, we would talk about localizing the ad with language or subtitles or whatever, dubbing, whatever it is. You're talking about really making this kind of belong in whatever market it's intended to be put into. And I guess what I'm struggling with is understanding, or maybe it doesn't even really matter. Are you creating something new, or are you just kind of iterating or localizing what's being done from corporate HQ?
It's a good question. Let me go back to your original. You said I'm setting up an agency. We're actually not an agency. We are a software company, and we are going to agencies and saying, this is a way for you to be able to create and localize, particularly videos that you weren't able to do before. You couldn't afford to, or the client couldn't afford to, so you didn't, right? Or you just didn't have the time. So what we're doing is we're building software, and I go to the agencies and I say, here's a new tool for you. It's a bit like the social media, the PR agencies completely ignored it until, and this, I was very involved in this, until there was social listening. And they go, oh my God, that's our space. We now have found out who's talking about what, and whose reputation is at stake and who's the influencer, and then that grew into a whole influence business. So your question, it's not, so the way I see it working is technology is very good at either empowering people that before couldn't have access to it, like SMEs, small scale brands, or what it does, it pushes skillful people into a premium space. I always find that like communicators, creatives, they spend, if you sit in an agency, the junior creative do the most mundane stuff they ever given. They have, it's a bit like being a banker. You spend years and years and years doing research, and only does your true capability come into action 10 years after doing grunt work, right? Same in the agency world, is you do grunt work, and then you graduate into assistant creative director. You can actually come up with ideas and concepts and inventive stuff. So the way I see it is this: all the technology is doing is it's pushing that, I get that floor up, creating a premium service, but it's also giving people access to tools that they couldn't access before. So suddenly you see a whole bunch of brands and companies that can suddenly create content that actually they couldn't do before, right? So it's more along those lines. If your question is, are we replacing people? I don't know. I was thinking about this over the weekend. Did Photoshop replace people? Did Maya, the 3D software, replace people? Yes, but it also created a whole new set of jobs, right? So I think we're in this phase where the system is getting shaken and people are going, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Do I have a job in the future? And then you've got people saying, yes, I do. I'm trying to embrace it and saying, what can I do with this? How does it make my job better? How can I save time, right? Or how can I create stuff that I couldn't do before? How can I test it? How can I sell this idea to my client? Who needs a boring 50-page PowerPoint when I can summarize this in a little video that I've just created on Nano Banana?
Well, you're a software company, and I'm doing the air quotes because you're actually living proof that new jobs get created from this. It's kind of, you're doing a function that didn't exist before, using technology in a way it hadn't been used before. I want to look at the external side of things, what you produce and how people react to it or how it's accepted in the market. And I want to ask you specifically, quickly, about e-commerce. You made an assumption that you said didn't really pan out about e-commerce being early adopters. I used to work at Alibaba, and I remember Alibaba was using and crowing about LLMs and all the the large language models and whatever, the Turing type test and things like that. And then there were other applications that I don't really want to talk about here, but had to do with e-commerce. So I guess I would ask you, number one, what are we seeing in China, which as a country has really just kind of woven AI in its various branches into everyday normal life and business life, commercially, governmental level, public level? You can smile and pay, China fairly well. Your team is sitting in southern China. What does it look like there in terms of how AI is being used now in the areas where you are, like advertising, marketing, and in the corporate side of things?
It's becoming, well, like anything in China, remember when the bicycle companies were launched?
Yes.
It's becoming highly, highly competitive. Yeah, China is a very aggressive, very competitive market. And when they decide to do it, the Chinese go full on. So what we're discovering in China is that there's a lot of people who are rehashing and pretending they can do stuff. So what I call it's like the Photoshop factories, right? The problem in China is also quite cheap, right? So a company, a brand, an advertiser will have a choice of, do I send these images to a Photoshop factory and get them to do it? And is it cost effective? Does it come back with a proper quality? Or do I work with a software company to give me a tool that I can use and own, etc.? So I see in China, there's a lot of testing, that much more hunger than the West, and probably kind of pride driven, but also just the Chinese nature of business, right? It's just like, we're in this, we've got to compete. So I see, what's funny is I see, we're in Guangzhou, right? That whole kind of area there. You've got, if you go to Guangzhou now, Alibaba, Tencent, all the big Chinese companies have got this, massive buildings, and it's like Shenzhen moving into Guangzhou. In fact, if you fly over it, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou are almost one joined up building, construction site, I guess. What's happening in China is that their technology, they're embracing it and they're testing it. I think it's like the bicycle companies, and there's too many bicycle rental companies, and they ended up with piles of unused bicycles. I think if you use the same kind of metaphor, there'll be piles of unused AI happening.
Right. So we'll have a great reckoning, but right now they're in the hyper competitive stage.
Yes.
And now I'm going to ask you, from your perch in Thailand, where you're dealing all around the region, I guess largely outside of China, ex-China. What does that look like? You're dealing with both Western and Asian brands, I guess. So how does that world look when we're not in the hyper competitive situation that China's in?
Well, that's exactly why I'm here. I used to come to Thailand on business, and moving here is very different because you realize the Chinese speed is really in the fast lane. And you come to places like Southeast Asia, and any technology or ideas you bring to China, you look at Lazada, Shopee. Why do the Chinese dominate in Southeast Asia? Because Southeast Asia is just too laissez-faire, right? It's too mellow. The Chinese just come in, they've got the same energy, and they dominate the market. So what I'm finding in Thailand is that I don't really work with Thai brands. I work with global brands based out of Thailand, because Thai brands are, frankly, not ambitious. There's so many good Thai brands, and they're happy with what they've got in Thailand. They're a bit scared about going overseas. I just don't see that ambition. So, and this is not just coming from me, this comes from many people I've spoken to in the industry. I see a huge appetite in Southeast Asia for anything Chinese. The made in China is not cheap plastic here. Made in China is the latest, greatest robots, cars, EVs are all over this market. There is no question about games, your old area, Tencent games,
Yes.
all of anything to do with, it's all come from China, and it's highly admired in Southeast Asia.
I see. So I see what you're talking about. China is kind of higher in the value chain in this region than it might be elsewhere. You're dealing with global brands primarily. What are they? And you're also, you said, dealing with agencies that I guess serve those brands. What are they looking for or asking for in terms of what you can do for them? And I guess I've always viewed, some of the questions that emerged even before the technology was really put into place in Europe and the United States was ethical AI. Are we stealing IP? Are we, iterating IP? Was this really creative? There was this whole ethical discussion, but I want to put that aside for a sec and just ask you, like, what is it that they actually want from you?
It's taken me 2 years to understand what AI can do. Only last September, we engaged with Havas Media, and we've made them a handsome amount of money working with some of their insurance clients and stuff like that. To answer your question, they don't know what they want.
Well, what are you telling them they need?
They don't know what they want. It's a bit like social media. When it first started, all the brands were like, isn't that where 16-year-olds hang out? I don't want to use pictures of my breakfast, and now look where we are. So I think this is why I said the communication bit really appeals to me. Is part of what I do is education. So, you need to show people and go, this is what it can do. And, to be frank, it's not until they see something exactly in their line of business, whether it's fashion, cars, toys, until they see a toy. If you show them fashion, they go, doesn't make sense. Show them a toy, makes sense. It has to be slap in the face. This is what it can do for you, right? So this is where the agency model comes in, is you're kind of laying the seed, you're planting the seed in the brand's mind to say, this is what it can do for you. How about we do something with you? So it's a very kind of educational, this is the opportunity at hand. It's not a commodity yet.
Well, either through an agency or through a direct corporate client, do you have any kind of campaign that you can talk us through, materials, content you created for them, and sort of what it looked like at the beginning, and then what kind of actually went out to market at the end?
I mean, I do. I'd like to probably share one that I think really is cutting edge, which is we got approached. So Havas, and they're happy for me to share this. One of their big clients is Sun Life Insurance, right? And this is quite, to me, it was very surprising because insurance firms are not known for taking risks when it comes to new technology. Usually it's like Nike or
The last
Adidas
in
or
line. Exactly. Yes.
McDonald's or whatever, right? Or gaming companies. So they said, look, we've got 25,000 agents across Southeast Asia. We want to engage them. We want to show them we love them. We want to show them we support them. And we want to do a New Year's Eve card. What can you do for us? And we found out they had celebrities in each country. So we basically got the permission of the consent of the celebrity to turn them into make a digital twin of the celebrity and their voice, only saying a specific sentence, which they were very careful about. Now we're dealing with an insurance firm, right? So compliance is extremely important. Basically, what we did was we created a digital twin of the celebrity. We then put these celebrities in a local New Year's Eve environment. Twin Towers in KL, Boracay in the Philippines, Hong Kong, Victoria Harbour, and Jakarta was in some certain area. I can't remember now, but so we put them in a setting, and then we invited the agents to upload a selfie, and they became an avatar, which basically interacted with the celebrity. The celebrity introduced them, said, "Here I am with Naj, the world's best insurance broker, wishing you a happy new year." Woo! Fireworks, da, 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 and a personal note at the end. So this sounds not too complicated, but it was, because we had to dynamically assemble 11 pieces of media and then create a video that contained the agent saying the person's name in the right language, the person turning and looking at the fireworks, and a message at the end. So all of that assembled, and we, over a period of 2 weeks, we created about 8,000 videos. At the peak of which was 500 videos an hour. And this was basically enabled Sun Life to communicate to, your people in the field are the most important, your agents, and say, look, we love you, we're going to support you, you get the message out. The agents then became the ambassadors and were able to send this to their clients and say, hey, I'm here, don't forget to buy life insurance this year or whatever, right? So it became rather soft, but quite nice content, rather than sending a PDF saying, here's the performance of your investment or whatever it is.
But also, I guess, I was going to ask you, what was the cost involved? Was it lower than doing it? And when you said 8,000, I'm like, whoops, there goes that question, because I guess the point is, it would be almost impossible to create 8,000 videos with avatars or without avatars, in 2 weeks. So this is something kind of a brand new category on one hand, but I also want to ask you, some of the stuff I've seen is really good. When it's good, it's really good, but sometimes it can be a little bit creepy because something just feels a little bit off to the human eye. What was the reaction to this? Did you guys nail it? Was the technology really ready for this kind of presentation?
Well, it's a good question. You imagine, right, amongst those 8,000 videos, there's a few that reach that uncanny valley, right? Imagine me now, and then there's suddenly somebody flies across the back of me, right? Or they come up and they're huge, and you're like, where the hell did they come from? And so,
or are you a bot? Is this the real Napoleon, or are we talking to your digital twin?
No, people don't care about that. I don't think people care about that, because they know that what's the likelihood of, Nettie in Manila to hang out with Sarah Geronimo, like a top celebrity singer, on a beach in Boracay? I mean,
But it's fun, right?
It's fun. It's fun. It tells me you care. You're sending me a message and it looks real, right? So to answer your question, we're actually collecting like a bloopers, like any TV production or any, there's always a bloopers, right? Somebody says something and they're dribbling, or I don't know, the makeup's not right. So it makes mistakes, but the way we set up our technology was you upload a photo and then it makes an avatar of you, and you can say, yes, it looks like me. No, it doesn't. Do it again, right? Oh, okay. Here's the actor saying your voice, your name. Does it sound like you? Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Do it again. So you go through, and now here's the video. Happy with it? Yes. Post it. No, start all over again. I mean, that the technology is not 100% accurate, nor are human beings, to be honest with you. I mean, I've worked with a lot of creative departments. They don't listen, get the wrong end of the stick, mess up, get told something different by their boss and come back with the wrong result, right? So I don't know, humans are not perfect and the technology is not perfect. It's getting pretty damn good though.
And the last thing I want to ask you in this topic is, when a lot of clients don't know exactly what they want, but they're global brands, what's your feeling then about how far are they willing to go with this when it comes to using new technology? Like take a luxury brand, for example. I find it hard to believe that they're, because what they're selling is image and authenticity. Even if it's David Beckham authenticity, it's that high level, like, oh, you want to be aspirational like him. How far are brands willing to go, global brands, with this new technology? Are we going to see this choked off fairly quickly? Is it going to be iterative, or is it eventually going to just really take off?
Well, the whole thing about selling technology is finding the right clients, your ideal client profile. Luxury brands are not an ideal client profile, right? They're so stuck in their own little luxury world. They're not an ideal client profile. An ideal client profile is an up-and-coming brand, is a gaming company that wants to get content out, engage people, is brave enough to try it. Up-and-coming brands don't have the wherewithal and they're willing to, try something out, right? Their brand is not so at risk because you're not going down the angle of, I'm going to create a new brand image for you. You're going down the angle of, you've got all this content, let me help you make it faster and more relevant. So I don't see this technology as a tool to create a brand. It's a tool to educate, to localize, to personalize, right? It's not for brand creation. It fails.
So it's extension.
When you look at the internet, go onto your LinkedIn, you'll see all these bozos pushing, oh, I made this video in 3 days and it's some kind of branded thing. And it's a load of, it's a giant lie. It never takes 3 days. And B, it takes multiple skill sets. It needs a storyteller. It needs a creative director. It needs an art director. Right. It needs a sound person. It needs a post-production. None of these things can be done alone. To that quality.
I see. So this is a tool and a technology that human beings are using for brands. It's extending the brand into a new area with new tools, but I read you loud and clear.
No, I think you're still getting mixed up. Sorry to say that.
Enlighten me, please. Come on.
When it comes to luxury, when it comes to brand building, as you know, is not one thing. It's like you've got to have a story, you've got to have a background, you've got to have a product, and then you've got to build those all together, right? It's not just one ad builds a brand, right? You need to have the product, you need to have the ambassadors, you need to have the coverage. So I think the storytelling part of it still needs huge amounts of human touch contact, because that's where you go out, you engage people, you do events. The world's moving away from digital, thank God, only to events. People really want to hang out and be with each other coming out of COVID. So it's that whole kind of, what do I feel? Who are these people? What do they stand for? And then what happens is, once you've got that level, is you've got a totally different level, which is like get my product out, get it in front of as many people as possible, remind them I'm there, remind them I've got the latest edition. My car's come out with a new version. I've got the latest phone. Apple does this, upgrade. I've got this, I've got that. There's a whole level of kind of just noise making. And that noise making, frankly, has become, thanks to Meta and Google, has just become trash, not relevant to individuals. So now the world is saying it's about me. Why is this relevant to me? Make it relevant to me. So I think it enables you to create images, videos, and go, oh my God, this actually looks like me, or this is my environment, or this is, I can imagine myself driving in this, along, Johor Bahru or whatever, right? I mean, it just the relevance comes in, right? So that's where I see it. It's not a brand building tool.
Napoleon, before we close, we like to sort of touch on something a little bit lighter that people generally won't see in the headlines around this region, but it's happening. In your daily travels, have you come across anything funny, light, interesting that falls into this sector that you're in right now? Have you seen a interesting use case that we don't know about, or something that's funny or just didn't work, and what the effect was?
I mean, there's a lot of funny stuff. The internet is full now of memes, right? I mean, most of it seems to be related, focused on your great leader. But yeah, that being in Bangkok, it was very interesting. When I first moved here, the Chinese community, Chinese tourism is a big thing in Thailand, right? 11 million before COVID, and that fell to 3 million. There was an attack in a shopping mall here, and unfortunately, a mother and child got killed, and they're from China. So the prime minister at the time, was it Paparan Srinawatra? I can't pronounce her name properly, but she had I don't know if it was her or somebody within her group said, look, we need to make a video to appeal to the Chinese. So she made a video and said very frankly, this is me, this is my avatar, and I'm going to speak to you in fluent Mandarin. And she made a video, it went on WeChat, and it was her saying, look, we really welcome you, we appreciate you. And, you can imagine somebody in Shanghai, Guangdong, whatever, seeing this video of a Thai prime minister who, is Asian, Chinese roots. And she's saying in your mother tongue, I really appreciate you. It seemed to be the right thing to do. And I think it was very brave.
How did it go
went
over?
down, as far as I know, very well.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, because unlike America, they don't the default is not attack.
Right.
The default is not, let's cancel her. Right. It's like, oh, this is really interesting. How'd she do that?
And even though it wasn't herself, but her digital avatar, it was accepted and it was fine.
I haven't trawled the WeChat to find out, but at the time it seemed that I didn't see too much backlash. She didn't lose her job because of it. She lost her job because of some other conversation she had.
Right. Okay. No, good to know. And also very, very good to know and learn about what you're up to. And I have to say, I learned a lot today. This is enlightening for me. I said to you before, please enlighten me. And I really meant that. This is a new area for a lot of us. You don't talk down to us. You talk through it. It's been wonderful to have you on Asia Agenda today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Been great. Really enjoyed it.